Hello, MID. Little bit of good news, some news to kind of temper expectations as well. We've had a lot of good rain lately. When you look at the rain numbers that we've had and snow, one of the things that's important to note is that the Central Sierras, which is where our watershed is, that's where the snow melt and rain that falls there makes it down into Don Pedro, which is our reservoir, is still below average for this time of year. It's about 90% of average for what we'd expect to have this time of year. So as we move through the year, everything's been really good. No one's going to complain about the rain and snow that we've had. But I do think it's important to note that the amount of rain and snow we've had is still, up to this point, just below what would be average for this time of year. For the snowpack, the rain is a little bit above. So for the year, we're at about an average year. So everyone gets really excited and goes, boy, we've had such a good year, going to pull us out of the drought. We had this El Nino. Well, it's really been about average. So is it good? Yes, we will absolutely take it. The northern part of the state, it's been much better for the northern part of the state than what it's been for here in the central part. But it's still really an average year. The concern becomes, scientific speaking, we still had an El Nino year. An El Nino doesn't always equal more rain. Really, all an El Nino is a warming of the Pacific Ocean down off of Baja. Well, that's what we had. So by definition, we had an El Nino. The El Nino just didn't bring the historic rains that we saw in '97. The concern that comes with that is traditionally following an El Nino, you have a La Nina. And a La Nina is a dry pattern. So the concern becomes for next year that we have another dry year and we're right back in this drought where we've been. But the rain and snow that we've had was desperately needed. And the bit of good news is this year we are going to provide 36 inches per acre to our farmers, which is we look at as a full allotment, a capped allocation. Last year, to give you an example, we provided 16 inches per acre. This year we're at 36. So it has played a tremendous role in the amount of water that we're going to have available to our growers. It doesn't mean the drought is over. It doesn't mean things are going to turn dry again, but things are definitely better than they were the last couple of years. Even in the 2014 season, we had a 24-inch allocation. So this is the best that we've had going back to 3 years ago, which was the last time we had a 36-inch allocation. Other things at the district, we had a meeting this morning that was a very, very good turnout by a lot of solar companies. We're looking at, for our net metering is what you provide to solar customers that have rooftop solar. Net metering says when you have solar panels on your roof, during the summer you produce a lot of power. You produce more than you need. So the district buys that power from you. In the wintertime, a lot of times solar customers aren't producing enough power, so they're buying some back because there's just not enough sun to cover their power demands. At the end of the year, you do a true up. Most solar customers receive essentially a refund check because by the end of the year, the district has bought more power than we have sold them back, so they get a refund for that extra power that they produced for the system. State mandate says that we have to allow 5% of our usage to fall into net metering category. We're going to meet that by potentially here in the middle of April. There's only about 5 utilities in the state of California that are nearing their 5% capacity on net metering, which says a lot for the irrigation district in that we have been very, very open and favorable to rooftop solar, and rooftop solar has grown here very rapidly because it's been very favorable here for the district. As we hit that 5% cap, the district is going to look at creating a new net metering program for anybody who comes in after the 5%. The reason for creating a new net metering program, anybody who already has rooftop solar, nothing will change for them. They stay the same. Anybody new that comes in after we hit that 5%, we're trying to develop a new set of guidelines. The reason for that is when a person puts rooftop solar on their house, everybody else who does not have rooftop solar ends up paying about $900 to that person at the end of the year. Because the amount that they end up paying the district doesn't cover all of our costs to have them as a customer. The problem there is we still have to have backup generation for that customer. You still have to have all of the infrastructure was already built to have that person. When they drop out essentially as a customer and go on solar, we still have all those fixed costs to cover that person. So when someone else new goes on rooftop solar, it's about $900 that gets transferred as a cost shift to non-solar customers. So the goal of the district is to reduce that so that not everyone else is paying so much for everybody who's going on the rooftop solar. So that's being discussed. We had a big workshop this morning. We're going to have another workshop on April 19th to further discuss this, and then create a new net energy metering program and vote on by the April 26th meeting. So if it's something that you're interested in, if it's something that you're thinking about doing, I encourage you to stay involved, maybe come to the board meetings if you can, and express your opinion on as we try and formulate a new program going forward. The other thing that I'll mention, and you've heard me talk about it before in this room, is the state is looking at mandating a bunch of flows that we have to send down the river that would essentially devastate our water supply. That would essentially put us in a government mandated state of drought. It's very much tied in with the governor's tunnel plan. So if the governor's tunnel plan goes through, it means our communities are going to suffer when it comes to water, because they're going to try and take our water to make up for the water that's not flowing through the delta. The State Water Resources Control Board is expected to release that plan sometime coming up in April. And when they do, you're going to see a PR campaign from MID and TID both to try and combat that flow proposal. And we're going to try and do as much as we can to educate the public and get people involved to let the state know that taking our water is unacceptable, because we're the ones that will suffer from it. The state has already said that there will be significant yet unavoidable impacts to the community, and that it will definitely cost this community in lost revenues, lost tax base, and also loss of surface water, which means everybody will turn to groundwater and start pumping, which puts us in a predicament of overdrafting our groundwater basins. Right now, the state of California has a map throughout the Central Valley of overdrafted groundwater basins. In the entire Central Valley, from Sacramento down to the Grapevine, there are only 2 water basins that are not in critical overdraft. That is the Modesto subbasin and the Turlock subbasin. So essentially what they're going to do is take the only 2 subbasins that are not in critical overdraft, because we have access to surface water, take away our surface water, force people to pump, and put us in critical overdraft, which doesn't make any sense. So that's going to be coming out. When that does, you're going to hear a lot of information and ways that you can get involved to let the state know that taking away our water has significant impacts to our community, and it's not acceptable. With that, I think that pretty much covers the current goings on at the district. If anyone up here has any questions?
One of the reasons we're not in overdraft is because of the elevation of our county, I'm assuming, that if we drafted much lower, we could see water.
No, we're elevation of our county really isn't it. The basis is because we've always had access to surface water. The first irrigation district created in the state of California was Turlock. The second irrigation district created was Modesto. When it comes to water rights in California, the law says first in time, first in right. Finders keepers, right? So we have some of the oldest surface water rights in the state. We also, as ratepayers, own our reservoir. Our reservoir was built by the ratepayers of the district, not a federal project, not a state project. It was built by the ratepayers in the district. And because of that, the state hasn't had that ability to just take water whenever they want, or have or the federal government to have jurisdiction over our river system. Because of that, we've always been able to provide very, very sufficient surface water allocations to our customers, so they haven't pumped. Most growers in our communities haven't had to have wells. Over the last couple of years, you've seen a lot in the news. Terry's had to deal with this a lot, where there have been a lot of wells going in Stanislaus County. The reason for that, and why you're seeing a lot of wells going in here, and all over the state, but specifically here, is a lot of farmers didn't have them because you didn't need them, because we were always irrigating with surface water. On top of that, we have sandy loam soils that allow water to penetrate very quickly. A few years ago, was it the NR? No, it was USGS, US Geological Survey did a study that showed that 80% of the groundwater recharge in this community comes from surface water from the reservoir. So it is the ability for us to own and operate our own reservoir has been invaluable, and our land values have gone up because of it. You try and buy farmland in this county, right now you'll pay between $40,000 and $50,000 an acre. The reason is because our access to water. You go down to the Fresno area, you might pay $15,000 to $25,000 an acre for farmland because they just don't have the water. So it's always been our access to surface water.
Going back to the 5% regarding net metering, are you saying that the district is buying 5% of their energy from rooftop solar?
No, we don't buy 5% from rooftop solar. 5% of our energy usage has converted to rooftop, but we're not buying, because there's a consumption there. So we're not buying 5%. We're buying some, we're selling some back to them. When you look at the average solar customer, if you were to look at it as a line graph on their usage during the summertime, they're way overproducing versus their demand. Their demand was at the top of this podium of what they need for their home. They're producing way up here. In the wintertime, it's down lower than demand, so they're buying some back. So we're not buying 5%. It's kind of a confusing calculation on what exactly the 5%. It's like 5% of your peak time usage, and it's.
So what is the 5% in reference?
It is of a demand, but it's a calculation of like peak time usage. Whatever your peak usage is, the state mandate is you have to allow net metering for up to 5% of that demand. So when the average solar system in the district, I can't remember, I think it's.
So there'll be a cap when rooftop solar provides 5% of our energy needs during peak?
No, it's whatever this equation is, and we're going to hit that 5% mark probably sometime middle to the end of April. So we're very close to hitting what the state mandate is for having solar for a utility our size. We're very close to hitting it. Turlock hit it last year, and they already implemented a secondary net energy metering program. There's, I think, 4 other utilities in the state that have hit their cap, and they just barely have, and haven't even formulated a secondary net metering program. The benefit to forming a secondary program is technically, as publicly owned utilities, we don't have to offer anything. Once you hit your 5%, you can essentially say, we're not going to do anything anymore, and the solar industry would suffer tremendously. We don't think that's a viable solution. There's people whose jobs depend on putting in solar panels. There is economic activity there. So our plan is to try and find a program that doesn't cost shift as much from solar to non-solar, that still will allow solar to continue to grow in the district.
So it sounds like we're getting 5% of our power from rooftop solar
No,
on the hottest day of the year.
No, it's not, because the problem with solar is it's unpredictable. So on the hottest day of the year, we're getting maybe a fraction of a percent.
Okay, any other questions for Director Wenger? Yes, there's a question over here.
Question.
Are you telling me I'm
Reading the
going
newspaper, they're talking about Shasta being full for this year, and a couple of the other dams in the northern. The state is not paying any attention to who's got water and who doesn't.
Oh no, the state's definitely paying attention to it. They just.
Are they using that information?
Well, the issue is, so even on right now, Folsom is releasing a ton of water that they could be putting into storage.
But they can't hold it.
Well, they have room, they could hold it. The problem is with a lot of the guidelines on releases of those water, is it's based off a chart that was developed by the Army Corps of Engineers 40 years ago. So the chart says if your inflows are this, you must release this. Doesn't take into consideration potential inflow that may yet come in, doesn't take into consideration current reservoir levels. It's based off of inflow. So if your inflow is high, you have to release a certain amount, whether you have capacity or not. You're right, Shasta is quite full. The problem is when the tunnel plan goes through, they're essentially going to take the Sacramento River and divert it underneath the delta. And the problem there is a lot of that water that's flowing through the Sacramento and through the delta is holding the salt water at bay. It's keeping the farmland there viable. The part that doesn't make any sense is there's 2 rivers that meet in the delta, provide all the water. The Sacramento, the San Joaquin. The Sacramento provides 80% of the water that goes into the delta. The San Joaquin provides 20%. The tunnel plan will take the Sacramento and divert it under the delta. They need to try and make up for that lost water. They're trying to go after the river that provides 20% to make up for the loss of the 80%. It's feasibly impossible, but that is what they're attempting to do.
Thank you.
Any other, yes, Dwayne?
What's the status on our aquifers